So, with that in mind, I want to talk about just a couple of strategies for how to overcome it. But as I was writing this, I realized there's a really important point that has to be made, which is that this isn't okay. And by my sharing with you some strategies about how to overcome this stuff doesn't mean that it's all right or that it's fair or anything. I think most clear-thinking people would embrace a meritocracy. We want people to be evaluated based on the merits of their ideas, of their performance, of their strengths and their attributes. And so I'm not standing up here just trying to say something that I think would be appealing to this group, but rather what I hope would be the clear and objective-minded conclusion when looking at these things. So that's a long way of saying that I don't think it's right that this is something that you need to think about, but it is. It is in reality. Not fair, but true. So therefore, let's talk a little bit about what are some things that we can do as we're heading into these conversations. So the first is this idea of reframing a conversation. For example, if an investor is framing the conversation in terms of what is your current performance, and they're really focused on trying to poke holes in your current performance, when you're answering them, you can either try to defend your business model, which is likely setting up kind of an unconscious mental construction that validates the questions of the potential investor. Instead, when you're answering, you should try very much to frame those questions in terms of, yes, but what am I going to achieve when I get my funding? How are we going to change that? And try to drive your answers back into that kind of aspirational, forward-thinking mindset, because that's where investors are likely to get swept back up into that, and it might mitigate somewhat of the bias of where they're heading. Redirecting the questions, similar concept. I would say don't do it like politicians do, where they just don't answer the question. That would not work. But I like to think about if you get a question that you don't think sets up your pitch well, my suggestion is think of your answer as a first half of the sentence and a second half of the sentence. And in the first half of the sentence, address the question. But in the second half of the sentence, redirect it. So going back to our past example, if an investor says, well, I see that you have a customer retention rate of 65%. Why do you think, what's contributing to that? Again, that's very stuck in the present. It's not looking forward. It's not likely to work out well for you. And you can say, well, what we've seen is that of the 35% of the customers we lose, more than 80% are due to a lack of follow-up. And we don't have the resources for follow-up. So once we secure our funding, this is how we're going to improve upon it. So it's reframing those examinations to look forward, because that's where their mindsets are when they're talking to men. And data shows us that that's what's more likely to get them to write the check. Okay, anticipating stereotypes. I feel very strongly about this one. And I guess what we've come to realize is it's sort of unavoidable. When you're meeting people for the first time, no matter what, they are filling in assumptions about you based on things that have nothing to do with you. So they are defining you in their own minds even as you're speaking. And the only thing that you can do to stop that is to define yourself. And so when you're meeting with new investors, I would say even early, very directly, vocally, and in a way that can't be ignored, you tell them who you are. And don't allow them to pull on their past assumptions to define you. And I think that it is a strong move to tell people who you are pretty upfront. And let's bypass this from ever becoming a possibility that people can use these systematic errors in judgment when they're evaluating you. You need to take the bull by the horns in that regard. Drawing comparisons. Again, what we're trying to do here is to access people at an unconscious level. And so what we want to do is for them to associate your business with other businesses that have succeeded in the past. So if you know the story about how Google started and how they almost sold for $500,000 but didn't, I guess they're kind of happy about that. By the way, Yahoo had the chance to buy them for $500,000 and turned it down, which not a great choice. But the point is that the more that you can start to reframe your business with other businesses with whom they have this association of success, the better off you're going to be. Also, identifying commonalities. A lot of times, investors will be vocal about what it is that they look for and what defines an appealing investment to them. Don't assume that they'll make the connection between their stated principles and your business model. It's better for you to be very explicit in pointing that out. Because if you can make that case convincingly, you'll trigger something called consistency theory, which says that we very strongly are motivated to be consistent with our past statements. So this is a technique that you can use to identify how your business aligns with their stated goals. And then finally, given what I'm talking about, this probably isn't a surprise, but data is the enemy of assumptions. And so many unconscious assumptions are what run or what create these problems. To the extent that you can come in with strong data and strong research, and the more that you can center your presentation around unquestionable facts, the harder it is for people to revert to stereotypes and make some unconscious judgments that wouldn't work in your favor quite unfairly.